Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 227. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gil from Communities Digital News, Daniel from The Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Oh my God, it's a tragic trio together tonight. Tragic trio.
Yeah, and again, my apologies for starting the show late. I had some other business matters to attend to, plus Gail and Daniel, we got to run in our mouth during the pre-show, so it is what it is. My apologies.
Unfortunately, all the good stuff goes down before the mic's on. We'll see. Some of the
one of these days, I'm gonna do a because I got some of the recordings of the pre and post fight stuff on audio. I got it recorded. One of these days, I'm just gonna do a show just behind the scenes stuff and bloopers.
That's the threat he uses, everybody, to keep us in line. I'm telling you. It works to a point. It works to a point.
Because admittedly, sometimes a lot of the stuff that's being said before and after the show, it's heavy hitting is even more interesting than what you hear during the show sometimes, because we have some exclusive stuff that's said, and some of the things we say what we really feel.
No filter.
Pretty much. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, live YouTube show, podcast, and blog discussing all things boxing. No matter what, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, we will talk about it. To find out information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the blog page is the place to go to. P4PBoxingReport.wordpress.com is the link. You check the right of the page, you'll find links to where to find Pound for Pound Boxing Report all over social media platforms, your Facebooks, your Twitters, your YouTubes, your G Pluses, and places like that as well. You also check the right of the page, find links to where to listen to the show in podcast form on any available platform that carries podcast, minus Spotify. So, and also, if you're a fitness enthusiast, if you're interested in getting into shape, if you want some tips, if you want some advice, if you know what Beachbody is, if you've heard of things like Beachbody and P90X and Shakeology and stuff like that, hit me up. You can also find the links to my Beachbody online fitness page. So if you're interested in that, if you need any tips or advice, or you're interested in any kind of programs, I'm just saying Beachbody.com, particularly Beachbody on Demand, any kind of workout that you're interested in, Beachbody.com, they have it. And the 2-week trial is forever going. So hit me up on Twitter, hit me up, email. I can help you out. I'm just saying, I see Gus is also joining us. What we're going to do is, because there's so many fights to recap from this past weekend, I'm going to split these fights up between certain individuals. I'm going to go to you, Gail, on this first fight I'm going to talk about, because you was at this event in Las Vegas. Ryota Murata coming to the United States to defend his title against Brandt, and suffice to say, this is the upset of the weekend, as Brandt defeated Murata, winning the WBA middleweight belt. He did not just beat him; he dominated. Dare I say, overwhelmed him. Even after the fight, Murata admitted that he admitted not that he just lost, but he lost comprehensively. I wasn't able to see all the fight, but Brant was like rock. He was like the Energizer Bunny, just kept coming and coming and coming with punches and punches and punches. And from what I read on boxing Twitter, he never got tired. And again, it was just too much for Murata in the end. Your recap, Gail.
All due credit to Brant and his team for a superb plan and a superb job of conditioning that made the plan possible. Whatever this man did to train, he needs to bottle it and sell it. Murata has always been known as a slow starter. So Brant and his team were pretty upfront before the fight, saying, listen, we're going to come at him early and try to get to him early. And sure enough, from the opening bell, Brant came right at him, punches in bunches. But watching his work rate, most of the media, including a majority of the media being from either Japan or Japanese media who cover boxing in the United States, who are here, based here, Even the majority Japanese media, we all thought, Brant's going to punch himself out. Murata's just going to weather the storm and then come back and take care of business. Well, Brandt never wore out. Brandt never slowed down, never got his foot off the gas. And he was amazing. We thought, when is this guy going to get tired? And it didn't happen. He threw over 1,200 punches in a 12-round fight. Ladies and gentlemen, for a middleweight, that is a lot of punches. Good form, good mix, used the jab well, used body punching well. He was not able to put Murata on the canvas, but damn, he tried. Murata has a great chin, which we have seen. If you've seen his 2 fights with Hassan Ndam, even though he won both, despite what the judges said the first time, he took a lot of shots, because Ndam is a power puncher. Well, Brandt hit him hard several times. He buzzed him more than once with some just superb shots. Couldn't stop him, but as the fight wore on, we started looking at our cards thinking, he's got to be ahead. And then as we went on, we thought, he's definitely ahead on the cards. But ladies and gentlemen, it was in Las Vegas. So we thought, well, you do not want to be a guy letting the fight go to the cards in Las Vegas if you're at all uncertain. And if you're fighting the champion, if you're the challenger, that's a bad position to be in. But Brandt gave it a tremendous effort in the 2 championship rounds. He really had an absolutely terrific 12th round. I mean, it was just short of a stoppage good. It was that good. And we expected we might see scorecards of, 116 to 114, 117 to 113. We heard cards read of 118 and 119 on all 3 cards UD. We thought, no, not even the Vegas judges could be that corrupt. And then they announced, and the 3 happiest words you can hear in boxing. Brandt and his followers were elated, as you can imagine. Murata was clearly disappointed, but he did give all due credit to Brandt for bringing the fight to him and simply being the better man on that night. And it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. What's interesting now about Brandt is you look at his record, and he's coming off a loss from being in the World Boxing Super Series, but that loss was at super middleweight. He's never lost a fight at middleweight. And now he's got the WBA regular strap, which in theory makes him a mandatory for the current holder of the strap, who is, say it with me together, Canelo Alvarez, who's moved up to this crazy super middleweight fight, and who knows what the WBA is going to order. I mean, the WBA could order a fight and Canelo say, screw you. He's dropped belts before. It's impossible to say what kind of opportunity Brandt will get, but by winning that fight this weekend, he has suddenly made himself a player in a middleweight division that's moving around a lot with arguably the world's marquee fighter involved. So there is nothing but good things that are going to happen for him. And you feel different ways about different fighters when you're, on the media side of things as a professional. But there are some truly nice guys out there who deserve wins when they get them, and Brandt's one of them. I saw him a couple hours after the fight walking through the Park MGM casino, being greeted by well-wishers. And he was like a 12-year-old who just won the Little League World Series. It was utterly charming and good for him. He put in the work. It paid off.
Follow-up question before I go on to other fights and bring the other guest in. It was anticipated that if Murata won, it was set up an eventual showdown with Gennady Golovkin 2019. Now that Murata has lost, has there been any discussions about possibly Brandt moving in to a potential fight with Golovkin?
There was even, well, there was talk before the fight about a fight with Murata and Golovkin. And in fact, depending on what happened in the fight and what shape Murata was in, even as soon as New Year's Eve, which is traditionally a really big boxing night in Japan, there's always a major card scheduled for New Year's Eve. It's a thing. It's a fun thing that they always do. Well, Murata's out of the picture for that one. He got 12 rounds of being beat up pretty good. So is Brandt now in the running to be Golovkin's opponent? And do they perhaps, wait a little bit, given they both had been in pretty action-packed 12-round fights in the last month? Does it get deferred to January? Not a bad fight. I'd love to see it, honestly. Brandt comes right at guys. It's a good style matchup. Be fun for fans. I'm not sure Golovkin wants that rough of a fight, coming off his fight with Canelo. But it'll be interesting to see what the sanctioning organizations do. Because there's so many chairs to move around the deck now. I think once they all have their meetings and figure out who they want to order and how they want to deal with Canelo and his issues. There are a lot of conceivable matchups out there. Brandt makes a good opponent for a lot of guys. I mean, he has got a lot of options. So I hope that they think carefully about which ones are best for him and move from there. Murata has got to go back home and really rethink his approach. I mean, he is a massive star in Japan. This fight won't really dim that star there, but he's going to need a fight back at home to get back in the win column and then decide how he proceeds from there. I hope he learned a lot from this fight, and he, there was a lot for him to learn from. Sometimes a loss like this makes a guy a lot better moving forward, and hopefully that's true.
Won't dim his star power, but he got exposed. He really did.
He really did get exposed. Yeah. And I will say a tremendous number of Japanese fans followed him all the way to Las Vegas for this fight. They were out in force. It was a fun setup. The way the ring was configured, it was in a theater setting. So all the Japanese fans were on one side of the ring toward Murata's corner. Across the floor on the other side of the ring were all of the Brandt fans. And there were chants back and forth like we were at a high school football game of Murata, Murata versus USA, USA, being led by guys like Jarrell Miller and Briggs and Dennis Douglin, who's local. And it was a lot of fun. That's exactly how boxing should be, short of the championship level, a very convivial atmosphere. And although Lady Gaga is taking over that theater for her residency run, should you ever have an opportunity to see a card at this venue, which is the Park MGM, it's the old Monte Carlo Hotel for those of you that know Vegas. It's a dandy little theater. Sightlines are good. The venue is all refurbished, super clean, seats 5,500. And it's one of those tidy little venues without a bad seat in the house. So if you're in Vegas and there's a card going on, highly recommended.
Going to float around here. Gus, could you unmute your mic, please? I'm wondering, before I go into, were you able to catch the Emmanuel Rodriguez Jason Maloney fight?
Damn right.
Okay, let's go there. Last week we talked about that fight, mentioned it, how it's 50-50, 60-40 fight, and how it had the potential to be the best fight of the weekend. I've watched the fight a couple of times. I can't figure out who won. It's rare that I say that. I've watched it the first time. I felt Rodriguez may have edged it out. I watch it back a second and third time. I'm thinking, did Maloney do enough to win? He may have done just enough to win. The question for me is, Gus, what do you like? What do you prefer? Did you like the accuracy of what Rodriguez or the work rate and hustle of Moloney, particularly towards second half of the fight, where Maloney kept the pace up while Rodriguez got a little bit tired? Um, Good fight, competitive fight, but one, it's hard to clearly distinguish a winner here. And two, Naoya Inoue was ringside, and he had to be sitting there thinking, I destroyed both of these guys.
He's a confidence fighter. I mean, he may be thinking that, but it was a fantastic fight. I mean, highly anticipated fight, especially for all of us here on this, on this podcast who appreciate, boxers from all around the world and all weight classes. But Rodriguez, Mike, is a fantastic fighter, especially early on when he has his energy, he has his wits. An amazing fighter in the sense that he has one of the hardest skills in boxing, and that is counter-punching on the front foot. Normally, boxers will either, stand stationary, they'll widen their stance, take a step to the side, or they'll lean back or take a step back, specifically because it gives them a split second more, like a tenth of a second, reactionary time to see the punch, try and slip it and counter. Rodriguez early on, because he's got beautiful balance, his footwork is amazing. Fights with no sort of nerve jet. Maloney was a little bit herky-jerky during the early parts because he couldn't really get near Rodriguez because of his ability to stalk, sit at that range where he's not smothering his work, land beautiful, lead left hands, right hands, counter left hands, body punching. He didn't allow Maloney to engage with him at short range what Maloney was doing. So Maloney could only really have that herky-jerky style, try and use a bit more lateral movement, try and sort of pot shot, lunging sort of left hands, right hands to the body, but he couldn't really get close because of Rodriguez's accuracy and his timing. One of those guys where he has respectable power, and it's that kind of stinging power, but it's not concussive power, because the amount of clean shots that Maloney took to the head and to the body, but especially to the head, many an opponent would have been severely knocked out. And he took about 35 to 40 absolutely clean shots to the head, but he managed to absorb them, showed tremendous punch resistance, great conditioning, has a very good chin. It definitely looks like, and he was able to utilize that body attack consistently throughout when he was behind on the cards clearly during the first 5-6 rounds because of Rodriguez's accuracy specifically. But he was able to make indentations to his body, slow him down, and you could see that Rodriguez's power is definitely correlated to his conditioning and to his gas tank, because as that began to subside a little bit, the sting from his punches too began to subside as well. Very much like Sergey Kovalev in that sense. And a lot of fighters in general. When your gas tank goes, so does your punch accuracy, your output. So that's just a logical component. So Maloney was able to use probably his more superior conditioning then to engage with Rodriguez a lot more, whose activity had come down. He couldn't connect with that left hand when Maloney was trying to come in as much. Maloney started to change the levels a little bit, get underneath those, and start landing, vicious hooks to the body. And Rodriguez really didn't have the physical strength, which he did first of all to try and push him off, re-establish distance so he could fire those, those beautiful hooks that he does in straight right hands. So Maloney was able to, He had the strength and he had the stamina and he had the work rate, and he just outworked Rodriguez, who didn't seem comfortable with that short inside the pockets. Was clinching excessively as well. Couldn't really get his hooks off. Maloney was very clever. He was able to tie Rodriguez's his right hand and fire his own right hand to the body well, without infringing the rules that much. There was still one hand free, and he was fighting inside the pocket. So they were both trying to jostle for position. Maloney was trying to stay at short range, whereas Rodriguez was trying to obviously get him off and re-establish distance. But he didn't have the strength, and he didn't really have. It almost looked like the will at that stage. He did manage to have a little glimpses of success later on, but Maloney, certainly for the championship rounds 10, 11, 12, comfortably outworked him, buzzed him up a few times to the body. You could see Rodriguez disengaging. He broke range and he backed off. I think in the 11th round, he certainly looked hurt by a few of the body shots. So it really is a fight of two halves. A very close fight. Maloney staged a superb second half, recovery. 15-round fight, who would have won.
Yeah.
But I've only seen the fight twice, Mike, and I had it a 1-1-5, 1-1-3 to Rodriguez. I felt he did enough probably for the first 7 rounds to just eke it out. But you couldn't disagree with a draw, and you couldn't disagree with a 1-1-5, 1-1-3 for Maloney. So the scorecards had that sort of, parameter, split decision. Yeah, I think it was in my opinion, I think it was an excellent scorecard, and I think the winner got it just about.
Like I said, for me, I had Rodriguez barely ahead, but after watching the second and third time, I'm starting thinking to myself, maybe Maloney pulled this off. The fight was that close. I mentioned anyway at ringside, we'll go more in depth once the fight is announced and we get closer to the actual date whenever that fight is made. But just early on, Rodriguez is going to fight Inoue in the semifinals of the World Boxing Super Series Bantamweight tournament.
Wow.
Just to give a brief summary, your quick thoughts on that eventual showdown right now.
Words cannot express how excited I am for that fight, Mike. That to me is not only the most anticipated fight of the year, the heavyweight fight that is happening, also a fantastic fight, but these two are my guys. This is my weight class. This is the fight, Mike. You're talking about two fighters in their prime, Mike. Young, hungry, undefeated, both champions. Magnificent punchers, boxers. Rodriguez is one of the most fundamentally sound boxers I've seen for a number of years. He's far more fundamentally sound than Inoue, Mike. But Inoue is just explosive. So it's a great clash of styles as well. Inoue might be able to fight a little bit better at different ranges. He can fight inside the pocket, and he can fight at long range going backwards. Whereas Rodriguez, we've seen, may not like it too much at very close range, and he may not have the conditioning. And if Maloney is able to wear him down to the body, Inoue, along with Sergiy, are the two best body punchers in the sport. So he could be in trouble in there. So he has to keep the fight at longer range with Inoue to stop him, pot shotting either to the body or whatever. So I think Rodriguez is going to have to step on him, Mike, straight away from round 1. But Inoue, we've seen, has just had 2 first-round knockout victories. So he can start, he can start like a greyhound as well. So absolutely fascinating fight. I can't wait.
If Inoue puts him on the back foot, forces him on the back foot, and can connect inside, Rodriguez is in trouble. I didn't like what I saw from Rodriguez over the second half of that fight. The way his conditioning waned, the way that Moloney was able to get in there inside of him, land shots, and even not just land inside, but take a step back and step around a bit and land shots on the outside as well. Maloney does it by hustle. In a way, he can do the same thing, but he's a lot more dynamic. And he's fast too, but he's fast with power. That would concern me for Rodriguez. And plus, I don't like Rodriguez's feet. He can, when he comes forward, a lot of times to me, he comes in a straight line and in a way can catch. I think in a way's brain is underrated. People look at his power, his speed, how explosive he is, but I think he has a pretty decent boxing IQ and can catch on to things. And if he can catch on to that with Maloney, excuse me, Rodriguez, my bad, that could really spell trouble. And if he can land consistently on Rodriguez, no one's taking the power of Inouye. And if Inouye can land with a consistent manner to head or body, conversely, as you mentioned before, Gus, Rodriguez has respectable power. He'll keep you at, but I don't know if he has that dynamic one punch power that can really hurt guys in the way that Inouye can.
Yeah, Rodriguez's power is a combination of his balance, accuracy, and timing. He's very much an efficient boxer. He, as you said, he doesn't have exaggerated foot movements, but it's just enough. So he almost conserves that energy, which is quite ironic because he runs out of energy. But it's not too much wasted motions in the ring. He doesn't, try and circle around the target, try and exploit different angles to the attack. He can cut off the ring very well, but it's just that efficient movements and efficient punches. He doesn't tend to, waste very much. But up against far more dynamic and probably harder hitting boxers who can also move and fire combinations just as well, if not better. It may not be enough, but it's still a magnificent fight. When is it? Sorry, any idea?
It hasn't been announced, but the fact that in a way was at ringside, both had commentary after the fight in the ring with each other. It's for sure they're going to happen next. I'm hearing possibly March, but it's no official date or locale.
Sure.
As of right now, I'll go to you, Daniel. We'll talk about that. Was a DAZN card that took place in Orlando. What I'm going to talk about now is focus on the DAZN card that took place in Boston. I'm going to you to talk Demetrius Andrade. Listen, last week we talked about the issue with Billy Joe Saunders and how Massachusetts State Athletic Commission they denied him a license, Saunders subsequently relinquished the belt. He decided to give the belt up. Andrade is fighting, I'm not even going to try to say his name, Walter K. Andrade put him down 4 times, I believe, a knockdown in each of the first 4 rounds. Cruised his way to an easy decision win. How impressed were you, Daniel, with Andrade's performance? Were you really impressed at the way that he was able to easily hurt Walter, or were you a little bit disappointed that he wasn't able to finish him, given the such a hot start?
Oh, wow. First of all, we should acknowledge Walter K. from Julius Ndongo's way, that he came at least wanting to fight, but this fight shows why it's so frustrating not to have Demetrius Andrade in the ring.
Yeah.
The fluidity of the punches, the way he attacked the body throughout the fight, the way he varied the punches, 2-3 punch combinations to the body, then 2-3 to the head.
And the counter-punching skill.
Yeah. The way he was able to feint in and out, making sure that Walter, who's known as a power puncher, wasn't able to effectively land on him. Everything that makes Demetrius Andrade, that made your mouth water at the prospective fight with him and Canelo at 154, showed itself in this fight. And the main issue when it comes to this fight is your expectations for Andrade are technically lower just because he's made so many dumb decisions outside of the ring when it comes to business. And this pretty much lights it up because now he's a genuine player. He's shown that he's comfortable at middleweight. He has the height, he has the reach, and he has the variance of punches and skill to make it a problem. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to see Saunders in this fight, because Saunders is a boxer who can, if he needs to, land with power, and Andrade would have given him a hell of a fight if that's the Andrade that showed up. So I'm not going to say I'm disappointed in that fact. No, we know he hasn't fought in a while, but it just shows you that you need to have Demetrius Andrade active. He has a belt now. He is a player. Pretty much just lining up like the entire middleweight division is going to be on the zone somewhere or another. So, yeah, this is something where I just say, just tell me when Boo Boo's fighting next.
Given the fact that Canelo signed with DAZN, the likelihood of an eventual fight between Canelo and Andrade, or do you think Golden Boy is going to be like, nope, I don't want those problems?
It's going to depend on what the WBO does. If Saunders gets off whatever he's doing and decides, I want to challenge for my old belt, and we kind of know what the WBO moniker is in the UK, that could easily happen in case people don't know. The WBO stands in the UK for like the War and Boxing Commission. So they're really close relationships. So I could see that happening. It all mainly depends actually what the other sanctioning bodies are going to do around them when it comes to it. Like you mentioned now with the WBA could order Brandt versus Canelo. The WBC could still stick to their guns and say, you'll fight Charlo or you'll fight Golovkin again next. It all really depends upon what he needs, but he's made a point with Andrade's made a point. Like he's shown that that's a skill set that you need to see Canelo go up against. And we have to agree, if it's up to Canelo himself, if he frustrates them enough, he'll do it. He'll fight. Like if you piss him off enough, he'll fight. It's not the ball's on Boo Boo's court now. Does he take the baton and run with it in this case? Because this is his shot. This is his shot.
Going to go back to you, Daniel. I don't know if Gail or Gus saw this fight. Katie Taylor versus Cindy Serrano. If you were able to see that fight, please give some commentary on it.
Gus, did you see that fight?
No, I didn't see it, Gail. Please, you can go ahead.
I will. Terrific performance from Taylor. She's the goods. She is the goods. It was a full rounds from opening bell to closing bell. It was a brawl. It got ugly in the right ways for the fans. Katie Taylor takes a pretty overwhelming decision. And it was rough on Serrano. You know, the Serrano sisters, both Cindy and Amanda, have had a pretty good ride in boxing. And Katie took Cindy down to her knees, not literally, but she dominated. It was one of those fights you look back at and you're embarrassed by it. She really did embarrass Cindy. Good. Katie's just a great fundamental boxer. If those ladies were going 3 rounds on a regular basis, she'd be getting knockouts like crazy. There was a little dust up after the fight because Cindy's sister, Amanda, who really is the better of the two, in my opinion, went after Taylor, and Serrano's were saying, yeah, well, you beat Cindy, but bluntly put, my sister's gonna fuck you up, so we're gonna see something go down there. I have no doubt that Taylor can take out Amanda too. I think it would be a tougher fight for her. But we're getting to the point with women like Taylor, with women like Michaela Meyer, who I'm increasingly impressed with, by Franchon Cruz, who had a terrific performance to win the WBC super middleweight title a few weeks ago in Las Vegas. And we have a fight this weekend coming up between Heather Hardy and Shelly Vincent. It's a rematch, and I won't get ahead of ourselves because that's a fight we'll talk about when we get to the preview section. But Heather said something in our media call with her yesterday that we would all do well to remember. It was a question about women boxers and female boxers and growing the sport and getting their chance. And Heather said in a very polite way, you know, we don't refer to ourselves as women boxers. We're just boxers. And we're getting to that point with performances like that and with fights like that. And the women's end of the sport has finally come on. And we're at the brink of the position for women in the sport where we were with women in tennis a couple of decades ago, you know, and it took athletes, you know, that brought a power game, that played like the top level athletes in the sport, who to that point were all men. You know, we're now starting to see women look like guys in the ring. You know, that's not that they look like men, they look like boxers. And Taylor and Mayer and Cruz are the kind of female boxers that look like professionals. End of sentence.
Okay, I want to single out this fight and want to talk about it myself. And if anybody else want to have some commentary, please do. Tevin Farmer fought James Tennyson, also on this DAZN card in Boston, undercard of Andrade and Walter K. And I have to say that maybe Tennyson was the perfect opponent. However, Farmer looked damn good in this fight. I mean, he really did. He had control from jump, did any and everything he wanted. It's the kind of fight setup that if you wanted to look good, he was the kind of guy who kind of would help make Farmer look good. Farmer took advantage of it and looked not just real good, but sensational at times. He's getting better and better with each fight. In my opinion, I think Tevin Farmer will he's one of those guys who will get improved significantly as champion. And the difference in this fight with other fights is the fact that he showed power, specifically to the body. After really boxing Tennyson's shoes off in the first 3 rounds, boxing him coming forward, outboxing him coming backwards, beautiful counter-punching skills with not just single counters, but counters in combination, led with a terrific jab. The way he found Tennyson's body, producing a knockdown in round 4, and then continued the body attack in round 5. Just a beautiful finish. They asked Farmer who he wanted after the fight. And of course, he said Gervonta Davis. Hearn said a couple of days later that he would like to make a fight with Gervonta Davis right now. You have John O'Carroll, who's set to fight an eliminator. Shout out to Three Kings for reporting the story. Three Kings Boxing. Carroll is set to fight a fighter by the name of Francois in December in an IBF eliminator. But because Carroll has been running his mouth so much on Twitter to Farmer said, F that. Forget the eliminator. I'll fight you right now in December, on December 15th. You don't need an eliminator. We can do it right now. But for me, Andrade, yes, he was the showcase fighter, but Tevin Farmer stole the show with his performance. I just love what I saw. For anybody else who saw the fight, please provide your thoughts.
First of all, what you saw in Andrade in the first fight is a little bit what Tevin Farmer did in the second fight, except the fact that Tevin Farmer is not known as a power puncher. He's known as a technician, and this was a little bit tailor-made for him. As a Tennyson didn't try to move that much, but the way he landed, the way he was doing flush, the way he pivoted, particularly when he was attacking to the body, which is what ultimately wound up winning him the fight. It showed that Farmer learned a little bit of the lessons from that blatant robbery that happened to him a couple of fights ago. And it also shows he's developing a lot more of a mean streak as it goes along, because he knows that, as I spoke about when it comes to the IBF, because they enforce their mandatories a lot more stringently than the other sanctioning bodies, can put their champions in a little bit of a no man's land as far as like getting big fights. And he knows right now that the fight that pretty much that entire Philadelphia, Baltimore area that wants to see is him and Tank. And Tank is having his issues at the moment. We can probably talk about those issues later, but
let's make it the news segment. Because
yeah,
I didn't put a news segment in the docket. Let's make that the news segment. Continue on, Danny.
Yeah, in that sense. But it's a fight that he wants. It's a fight that Tank has talked about wanting. It makes perfect sense to make it. And like I said, Tevin Farmer's proven his point. Like, he wants this fight, and it looks like he's damn well ready to take that fight.
Gail, Gus, if you were able to see the fight, some commentary, please. A quick word.
I'm really glad. Some guys just take a lot longer to cook, in their career for whatever reasons. They stall. They don't get the opportunities. They aren't on the development fast track. How long have we been talking about Tevin Farmer living up to, the expectations, the promise that we thought he had, and he finally did it. How satisfying for him. I'd love to see him fight Davis. I'm with you, Daniel. When you see a guy like this finally develop that mean streak, the ability to close down and close the show, that's really important in boxing. It makes for an exciting fight for the fans, and it shows you a guy is down to get business done. A lot of guys can win a fight without doing that, although once again, really should let it go to the judges' cards if you aren't too sure. So good for Farmer. He stuck to it, and he finally got where he needed to be. So let's see him in a decent fight, and let that mean streak come out to play with somebody he doesn't like. I think that would be the best possible thing for him.
If you were able to see the fight, Gus, quick word.
Mike, boxing fans in the United States would not have been familiar with James Tennyson, and therefore they would have assumed it was just a showcase for Tevin. But that's not the case. He was actually a good fighter who beat a very good amateur standout and a British and Commonwealth champion in the UK in Martin J. Ward, who was touted to win world championships. So a good victory. He was a puncher. So it was a good test for Tevin, who I think he made Mike, you covered the fight well enough. It was just a mismatch. Farmer, beautiful silky skills, very great, good movement, great punch evasion, good defense, especially against a puncher. Systematically, just schooled him, beat him down and finished him off. I thought it was a magnificent display. Well, I completely forgot what I was going to say. After the fight, he made an interesting comment in which, superficially, when you gauge his record, he looks like, somebody who's had a lot of defeats, not a lot of knockouts. But he mentioned that, he was getting those defeats early on when he had absolutely no amateur experience, and he wasn't taught how to fight. So therefore now, as he's been a consummate professional, he's been in the gym, he's sparred, he's had, professional coaching, a full-time boxer, he's learned how to fight, and hence, that technique now is paying dividends in him actually getting knockouts as well. So it may look superficially like he can't punch, but I think he can punch. It's down to, technique, as we talked about, especially when fighters who may not have that natural raw power, that don't need too much, education in how to, strike an opponent. Whereas, 80, 90% of people really do. They need to know how to stand, how to, deliver the punch, how to, rotation, talk, punching through the targets, etc. So he has that, and now you can see that, maybe it would be a mistake just to think that he can't punch and then engage at those ranges where you can quite clearly get knocked out. So um, I think he's got a great shot against Tank Davis. I see tremendous limitations in David. That front foot for Davis has to be planted. If you look at him, if Davis's front foot, lead foot, is not ahead of his back foot, he doesn't throw a punch, Mike. So I think he's very easy to work out, and I think Tevin could outbox him in that fight. But let's see if Tank is man enough to engage, because Tevin has wanted that fight for so long.
Beef for years they've had. First of all, I have to, every time I talk Tevin Farmer, I have to give a shout out to Miss Vicious Fox on Twitter. She's been a Tevin Farmer fan before most even knew who he was. Excuse me. She was on Twitter, tweet to me, keep an eye on this guy. I like him. I like him a lot. I really think he can fight. So really, 2-3 years when he was still in development stage, she was like, I think this guy can really, really fight. He doesn't have the record, but I think he can really, really fight. And I'll ask this question to you, Gus, but it's extended to everyone else. In an era where we falsely hold on to the manner of undefeated fighter, it's almost like Samson when he has cut his hair off when he's nothing.
Yeah.
Is Farmer like a refreshing example to what boxing used to be? Meaning, back in the day, the old adage was, if you didn't have an L on your record, that means you were not really tested. You were considered a bit suspect. And given, let's just go out there, the way Mayweather and others talk undefeated this, undefeated that, just hold on to that undefeated record for promotional purposes as much as anything else. Is Tevin Farmer, in a certain sense, an old school fighter?
You're right, Mike, and that is one of the biggest aspects which pisses me off in boxing. All these box rec motherfuckers who just look at O's and records, thinking that if a fighter has defeat or a number of defeats, that he's just, substandard and he can't be any good, without even understanding boxing, looking at the resumes, looking at the situation where a fighter has come on. Look at Orlando Salido, Mike. If new school casuals or just younger boxing fans were looking at his record, they'll be thinking there is absolutely no way that this guy would even be in the discussion for being in the Boxing Hall of Fame. But all of us here, we've seen him over the years, seen what he's done, how he's done it, the economic circumstances of certain fights he had to take, decisions, he had against him, where he was just set up, to take the fall against fighters, but he managed to shock the A-siders and get a lot of victories and, world titles, and the way he fought as well, delighted audiences all around the world. So absolutely, Mike, I just don't look at records anymore, Mike. I never even log on to box. I don't look at that at all. Not interested. I'm just looking at, it's not about the record, it's about the resume. And Farmer in particular is one of those guys. Yeah, he'll fight Philadelphia attitude. He'll fight anybody, anytime, anywhere. So if the promoters, can take advantage of that, he's very hot now, Mike. There was a time we were talking about Keith Thurman when he was getting victories. They didn't utilize him enough. This kid is hot. He's happy. He's financially getting some good paydays now. Get him in the ring. Take advantage of it. He looks like somebody who will keep his foot on the ground now. He wants the fights. He's already had defeat, so it's that it's that psychological factor in his mind. You know, it's like, so what? I've been in that position before. It doesn't matter. So it doesn't give him any fear, doesn't give him any stress, you know, it doesn't give him any concern. I think he can fight. I think mentally he's so comfortable, he doesn't really care. He doesn't take it too serious. And I think that reflects, you know, in his performances going forward.
The same question applies to you, Gail and Daniel, that I asked Gus. In a sense, given the current dynamics of boxing, could you consider Farmer old school?
Yes, I couldn't agree with Gus more. And Gus, you picked absolutely my favorite example, Orlando Salido, who was a guy that put butts in the seats every time, no matter who he was fighting, where he was fighting, because the fans knew they were going to get an entertaining product and see a guy leaving every ounce of effort he had in the ring. Come what may, decision going his way or not, and outcome going his way or not, didn't matter. He took it. You know, he might have made his complaints at the point, you know, that it happened, but nevertheless, move on. Who's the next guy? Give him to me. No hesitation. Frequently, I think it benefits these guys to take a loss earlier in their career, so they don't have that specter of that hanging over them, because it makes them reluctant to make the right fights, and it stalls careers. I think one of the best things that ever happened to Canelo Alvarez was going into the ring with Floyd as a youngster. Yes, he lost. Yes, he learned a lot, and I think that has served him well. And look where he is now. It didn't hurt him. A lot of the fighters who have been fan favorites over the years, you're right, nobody could have really told you what their record was. And we only have to look at the great heavyweight era of the 1970s, you know, where they all took losses against each other, and where the greatest of all time, you know, if you asked somebody on the street, you know, how many losses did Muhammad Ali have in his career? I bet you a lot of them would say none, or one, or two. They wouldn't really know, and they don't care. And we need to get guys back to that. And hey, Tevin Farmer can capitalize on that. Bless him. Good for him. There are guys I like to go see. They're not champions. They don't have, you know, a perfect record, and they might have a handful of losses on their record book. I don't care. I like to see what they do. I like what they bring. They give it their all. That's all we can ask for as fans.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
He's old school in that sense, and it's a weird kind of old school though, because we have to remember Tevin Farmer is a fighter that doesn't have a lot of amateur experience. He's been one of these type of fighters that has to pretty much have learned on the job. But he's found a style that he's able to do it, and he's been able to master it in a way that you wouldn't expect a fighter that didn't have a good amateur pedigree to master. And honestly, like, I agree with Gail when it comes to it. What gave Canelo probably pretty much more confidence than ever is he took that first loss, and he took it against the best fighter at the time in Floyd, and he learned from it. Tevin Farmer has taken his losses and learned from them. Like, look at his last loss. Well, it's not actually a loss. We all know what actually happened, but he learned from it. He's developed a mean streak. He knows now that he has to finish. And I do agree with Gus in a way. We do hang a lot on having that O in the loss column. But that's something, unfortunately, that it's a generational thing, to be honest. Like the previous generation, it was okay to take a loss. It only became this generation in a way, particularly thanks to Floyd, that were that O mattered more than anything because supposedly that O meant more money. And you're starting to see back a little bit of a sea change back to you can have a loss or two, but if you're a really, really good fighter, you're going to get your shot. It's a Farmer's a good example. If you want to go another Philly fighter, J-Rock might actually be another good example. If he stays on the path and wins the world title, we have to remember he was an afterthought after how he got beat by Jamal, but he's building himself back up, and I could see him with a belt within a year or two.
Let's move on to some news here. When discussing Tevin Farmer, we mentioned Gervonta Davis. You talked about some issues involving him outside the ring. Get into some detail about that now, Daniel.
Well, Tank is once again not happy with Floyd. He's obviously doesn't feel that Floyd appreciates him. He's in the doghouse, and I think he sort of faked retired, I think, a few days ago. What this brought out, though, was the ultimate troll moves that we've seen from Oscar De La Hoya. Because he offered a fight. I think, I forgot if it was with Vargas or Machado. I forgot who it was. He said, hey, Gervonta, you want a good fight? You want to get paid? Come to Golden Boy. Come to the zone. Which, of course, irked the ire of one Mr. Leonard Ellaby.
He threatened to call lawyers on dude and sue him.
Yeah. He said, like, he's under contract. And no, Oscar had the perfect troll response. He said, come on, do business. The zone pays a shitload of money. But that's what the situation is. That's what the situation is. They're poking each other in the bear. And like, granted, on the legal sense, Leonard Ellaby would be completely in the right to sue Oscar. Because then you're interfering with a contracted fighter. At the same time, though, what do you expect? Tank somehow, through some weird machination by the WBA, is recognized as the actual junior lightweight champion. Well, the guy that actually was the junior lightweight champion, Machado, somehow got moved to secondary.
I mean, he goes from Twitter e-thugging with Shakur Stevenson last week to now this. So yeah, he needs to get the outside the ring distractions out the way and actually do some fighting inside the ring, because I don't know what's going on with him. It makes no sense to me. Gail, I think.
Mike,
go ahead, Gus.
Mike, what has Floyd Mayweather done that is having some sort of adverse impacts on Tank? Floyd has got him title shots. Then he lost the title because he didn't make weight, which is primarily his own discipline issue and maybe that of his trainer. And then Floyd got him. And then once he lost the title, Floyd got him another immediate shot with that Argentinian, and he won the title. So Floyd has got him opportunities, and it has got him world championship titles at a very young age. So I can't see really what Floyd has done that is.
I mean, you can criticize Floyd for a lot, but in this case, all he's tried to do for the most part is help this kid. He was the one who suggested that Tank get out of Baltimore and take his training more seriously and come to Vegas. He eventually went on with Kevin Cunningham. He's basically tried to look out for him. And to your point, Gus, he's right. He got Tank a title shot when Tank really didn't earn it. He wasn't I don't think he was mandatory contender or anything like that. He's the one who got Tank the Under Armour deal. He's the one who got Tank the exposure in the UK boxing scene first title defense over in the UK. Main event live here in the US, not on tape delay or anything like that. Got him the exposure with the media in England. So, and even with all his troubles, he put him in a position to again fight for a WBA title that technically he's not WBA champ, but they gave him a title anyway. WBA
also had him on,
WBA
on
put
that
him, put him on the McGregor undercard.
Exactly. Yeah, that was my point. Yeah.
Well, the main thing I see from Tank is mainly it's just a case where it's almost a repeat of what we saw from Adrian Broner when Adrian Broner had his falling out with Floyd. Young fighters tend to buy into their own hype at times, and then they believe that the old fighters or your promoters are holding you back. They're not putting in the fights. They're not putting me in big money situations. The problem is when it comes to Tank, there's just only one fight people want to see. And Floyd, by his due diligence, has made sure that fight doesn't happen with Farmer. Because like what Gus mentioned, at this point, if you put a fight between Tank and Tenant Farmer, odds are Tenant Farmer is going to be the betting favorite.
If they were to fight right now, Farmer would beat him. He boxed his shoes off.
I've had that mindset for the past 2 years. That
because Tank just has not been consistent enough. He hadn't been in the ring enough.
Yeah.
Well, Farmer is getting better and better and better.
Mm-hmm. And on top of that, like, unfortunately, also the thing is, like I mentioned, like how Adrian Broner, like how he fell off with Floyd a little bit. Guess who? Guess who Gervonta hangs out with now most of the time?
Broner.
Yeah. Say what you will about Floyd. One thing Floyd will absolutely not tolerate is a poor work ethic. Nobody has ever criticized Floyd Mayweather for not working hard and applying himself. He is a disciplined guy. He never blows up in weight between fights. He's had a few personal behavior issues, but in the latter years in particular, he's kept his nose clean. Good for him. Gervonta Davis is a hot mess and an entitled little snowflake, and he's a whiner. And that's the bottom line. He doesn't want to work as hard as Floyd wants him to work, in contrast to Tevin Farmer, who has an excellent work ethic. He's a whiner. He moans and groans. He's got that sense of entitlement. And I'm going to speak as an old broad here. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe not. But Floyd isn't having it. And Gervonta's behavior outside the ring and his shenanigans have been regrettable in a lot of cases. And early in his career, he and I even went at it a little bit over some of his behavior in the ring. He disrespected an opponent. I told him he should be carrying on until he makes sure his opponent's okay after getting hit and knocked down. And he later admitted he shouldn't have acted up. But he seems to me, and like a lot of athletes in combat sports, probably because of the nature of who's drawn to them, he lacks impulse control. And that is a problem.
He's the type of, look, young folks, their frontal lobes don't really fully develop until they're like 24, 25, 26. He's acting out right now like someone whose frontal lobes have not developed.
Well, and you get into the hurt business, and I get it, and it's easy for somebody young to get very dazzled by all the trappings that go with it. And, when you're having early success, a lot of people fawn over you and you get a lot of attention, and you've got to have people around you help you keep your head straight if you can't do it yourself. And a lot of guys admit they've got to get through that patch. And if they have a trainer right on top of them and a promoter right on top of them, and they'll listen, they'll get through it, with relatively little damage. Then you have guys like Tank, and you're right, like Adrian Broner, the villain we all love to hate, tremendous natural skills, perform very well when they apply themselves, but simply can't do it long enough, consistently enough, and keep their bad behavior in check. And Floyd will just not have it. And good for him. He's a businessman. He's not there to be Gervonta's daddy. He's got enough kids to be daddy. He wants the guy to be professional and live up, to expectations. Gervonta is an employee, if you want to look at it that way. And, when he finally just is sick and tired of him, he started, it wasn't the smartest thing perhaps to do, but maybe the only way Floyd could get his attention was, say a few negative things about him in public, to get him to snap his head around. And listen, I don't think it worked, unfortunately. So, Gervonta is going to find out that he's on his own with very few friends, except those people who've decided to, go the way he has, Broner. Maybe Gervonta will last long enough for him to get a fight with Pacquiao. Who knows?
Floyd should have fed him to a Lomachenko when they were both at 130. That would have rearranged that impetuous little prick's ass.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that have been a good idea? Probably even Floyd probably didn't have the heart to do that. That truly is like throwing red meat to a lion. Oh my God!
And let's not forget that's giving money to Bob. And if there's one thing Floyd doesn't like, is giving money to Bob.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
Interesting.
Remember, Lou DiBella did that though, didn't he? Jose Pedraza was doing exactly the same thing.
Oh man,
and they fed Pedraza to Tank, ironically.
Yeah.
Well, Lou DiBella is one of these guys who says, that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, no matter who they are. Lou, God bless him, knows that sometimes it's best not to hold a grudge. Sometimes the benefits are worth burying the hatchet, for expediency's sake.
Yeah, and this is the interesting part when you think about this whole situation involving Tank. Like when Floyd tried to move in out to Vegas, we talked about this. There's not only the work ethic that Floyd has deployed while you're in Vegas, there's also a sense of the fact that he wants you to obey the aura of Floyd because he's earned that aura in that sense. And ultimately, at the time, we thought that Tank staying in Baltimore would probably be the better bet because the people that were around him at the time, when he was in Baltimore, wouldn't put up with what he's doing now. Unfortunately, it looks like he says replace those people and replace them with Bandcamp, which, by the way, apparently Jared Hurd is also now full-fledged now trying to be in that behavior, which is also bad. And he's learning he's learning all the long lessons. It's gonna take for him losing a very, very good fight in order for him to probably snap his head out. But even then, it may not happen. We mentioned Broner. Broner has lost a good amount of fights, and he hasn't learned a damn thing yet.
Yeah, and he still gets rewarded with the Pacquiao fight. I mean, again, I don't understand.
You want to transition to Manny? Oh God! Oh, we might as well do it, because I think somebody said it on Twitter. I think it was Steve Kim, but it's becoming more true by the day. Pacquiao was at one point seen as Bob's puppet, as far as what he said, how he behaved, what he talked about certain fights. And in record time, he's already talking like he's a PBC puppet in a way. Because everybody knows full well that Bud was not running away from a Pacquiao fight. But now that Pacquiao's officially signed to the PBC, he's officially, quote unquote, on the other side of the street. He wants to talk. It's going to be a long 3 years, man. It's going to be a long 3 years until he's able to run for president.
Again, another quick story here, Gail. You took part in a conference call on some fights here. Could you give some insight on that right quick before we go into the previews?
Well, you're going to have to tell me which one, because we had one for Jacobs Derevanchenko yesterday, and we had one for Barrera and Monahan today.
The Jenkins Derevanchenko.
So that was a pretty that was a pretty interesting conference call. You know, Jacobs and Derevanchenko, have an interesting history with each other. They have sparred. You know, they train together essentially. And for this fight, they had to separate themselves. So Jacobs went off with Andre Rozier to Oakland, and Derevanchenko went off with Rozier's second coach, and I can't think of his name right now, Gary. They went off to Colorado Springs so they could separate and train. Over the years, they have been sparring partners for each other. They have sparred 300 rounds together before this, and never really thought they'd end up facing each other because of the trajectory of their careers. You know, Derevanchenko only has 11, 12 pro fights, but here they are. So it's going to make for an interesting matchup. You know, they know each other very well. They, have watched each other in the gym. Jacob said, we're not exactly pals, and there is a language barrier, but a lot of respect. They have no animosity toward each other. But they all know that things are shifting around in the middleweight division. So, a win right now for middleweights is extremely important. So this is going to be, the sorting hat has come to the middleweight division and is hard at work. The more interesting part of that conversation involved one of the undercard fights, which is a rematch between Heather Hardy and Shelly Vencent. And people may not know their names well, but they may remember the fight they had because it followed an NBA playoff game, as I recall. Michael, remind me, was that the sporting event? The fight card they were originally on was on network television in the United States following a major sporting event. I seem to remember it being an NBA playoff.
It wasn't a playoff. It wasn't a playoff. It was a gold medal game for the U.S. in Rio. It was
an Olympics. That's right. So here's this card on after that. And these women put on a Salido Vargas style brawl. Bloody, crazy, good. Really a good fight. If people had never seen women professionals fight before, they'd be sitting there with their jaw dropped open. So it was, and Hardy won the first contest, but Vencent did a lot of damage. These two ladies do not like each other at all. They've had words on social media. They've taunted each other back and forth for years. And they both say, with straightforward honesty, they would enjoy nothing more to punch each other's lights out. So they're ready to go, and that fight just might steal the show on Saturday, And here we have the demise of HBO boxing, just as they are starting to feature women's bouts on their cards. Well, it's kind of in the better late than never category, but this is a fight. Just like we were speaking of a few minutes earlier when Gus brought up Orlando Salido, you don't really care what their records are. This is going to be wildly entertaining, and let them bring it.
Let's move on to
Gail. When is that fight happening?
That fight is happening this weekend at the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden. That's the one that they call the small room, which seats 3,500, if I recall.
Yeah, it's on the undercard of Jacobs Derevanchenko, Gus.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully you will be able. I'm sure some kind person will toss it on YouTube pretty quickly. I'm sure it's going to be very entertaining.
Going to some previews here, and I'll go back to you, Gus. Gail just gave details on the conference call between Daniel Jacobs and Sergey Derevanchenko. Your thoughts on that fight? What do you think the dynamic of the fact that they share trainers and they've sparred a significant number of rounds? Do you think it will benefit one fighter in specifically? Interesting backdrop here leading up to this fight, Gus.
Yeah, Mike, history and certainly recent fights where two fighters are extremely familiar with themselves, generally the fight which pans out generally is quite a close contested fight, specifically because they know each other so well. They know each other's power. They know the weaknesses that they've seen in the ring over significant number of sparring. But with 10-ounce gloves, with a lot at stake, you don't know. But Derevanchenko is a fighter that I saw quite a lot of as an amateur, and he was an excellent fighter back then. And early on in his professional ranks, he's impressed me as well. Very good body puncher, and he works both head and body well. He's not just specifically focusing on one area. Can fight on the inside. Now, a lot of criticism with Eastern European fighters or from the old Russian bloc is that, given the way they're brought up now, they fight very good at long range, but they have that inability to fight at short range, and they don't like it at short range. But he's a little bit different from that side. He can fight at short range. So he's I think he's a little bit more dynamic than what people anticipate. Now, Jacobs, Mikey, I've been a bit critical of Daniel. I've not really been impressed. I think he's overrated significantly, Mike. He was extremely fortunate in his last fight against Zelensky, I felt. Had he not got that knocked down, I thought Zelensky was the better fighter throughout. And Jacobs really couldn't handle the guy's movement. And Derevanchenko is very much like that. So, not sure how it's going to pan out, Mike, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sergiy, outboxes Daniel. Daniel might be the harder puncher, but I think Derevanchenko, I think he may be able to get the fight at mid to short range, and I wouldn't be surprised if an upset transpired.
I'm sorry, I had to step away for a second. So to go back over things, Gus, you think is not just a very good matchup on paper, but you wouldn't be surprised if Derevanchenko would win.
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't be surprised if he ekes out a very close decision.
He's quicker Derevanchenko than I thought in prior fights. Really sitting back and studying him. Yes, he's the shorter guy, but he's very strong physically. He's very fit, and his hand speed is much faster than people think, particularly on the inside. I think he could catch Jacobs with some shots here. For me, it's the strategy Jacobs wants to employ. If he decides to use his height and reach and can implore a good jab, I think he will win by decision here. But
politics
if he,
as well, Mike.
Yeah,
boxing politics. You know Eddie Hearn's philosophy. If you're not signed to DAZN, there's no way you're getting this and this fight. He's explicitly stating that. So, Eddie Hearn wants Jacobs, Andrade, Canelo, that little circle. So,
yeah,
maybe Sergey's not going to get any benefit on any cards.
Yeah, I'm going with Jacobs here by decision, but if he slacks up and focus, he has lapses of that at times during fights. Um, if he does in this fight, he could find himself some trouble. He could find himself some trouble. But I'm going with Jacobs by decision. Here, I'm going with Jacobs by decision, but it's going to be a good, tough fight. I'm going to you, Daniel. We mentioned You mentioned Felix Machado in discussing Tank. He returns to the ring fighting Yuandale Evans. I don't know much about the opponent Evans, so if you will, give a quick recap of not only a preview of the fight, but some insight in terms of Evans, who he is as a fighter.
I haven't seen much of Evans myself, but from what I see, he does have a good, decent record, 21, 14 knockouts. Looks to be like a really good round fighter in the peripheries. But this is going to be a fight where Alberto Machado has a point to make. Kind of like how Farber had a point to make against Tennyson. He has to make a point here because, like I mentioned when we talked about Tank, somehow, some way, he got put in the position where he was the real WBA champion to somehow becoming a fake WBA champion. But the WBA's mystical machinations. And he has a point to prove because that division is starting to heat up a little bit. And not to mention, there's already a couple of names that already said would fight him straight up, including one Francisco Vargas, who himself is starting to come back from it. And we have to mention, like, between this fight, there's Miguel Murchel, obvious Mexico versus Puerto Rico vibes. Or Mickey Roman beats Murchel. Again, Mexico versus Puerto Rico. And you're starting to see, like we mentioned, Rodriguez, you're starting to see some of the current crop of the young Puerto Rican fighters that might have been overshadowed a bit by Verdejo, starting to come in and starting to really show what they're made of after Verdejo's fall. So this is going to be a fight to me that's going to be very fun to watch because Machado, when he gets on, when he has a point to prove, he becomes a really, really good fighter.
Don't sleep on Evans. I'm picking him for this one.
Word?
Yeah, Mike, this kid can fight. He got an early defeat against Javier Fortuna, but he's a lot better now, and he can punch. I'm going for Evans upset stoppage.
No, he's absolutely right. You know, that loss to Fortuna is one of those things where you just get caught. I mean, it truly was a fluke. It wasn't. He didn't even have a chance to perform. Well, Gus, wasn't it a first round knockout? He was pretty vicious, as I recall.
Yeah.
And that was 2012. It's a long time ago. You know, Machado's wins have been not exactly definitive. So it's very possible this could be an upset. That would not surprise me a bit.
It would be an interesting
upset.
It would be an interesting night of upsets if Derevanchenko and Evans wins.
Yeah,
I've already got that accumulator on.
Well, you know, when you put your money where your mouth is, that's saying something.
Yeah.
Derevanchenko, Jacobs, Machado, and Evans. That's going to happen on HBO. We already talked. Gail already gave gave a lot of detail in terms of Heather Hardy and Shelly Vencent. We're also fighting on that card. So I want to move from that card to the DAZN card in New Orleans. World Boxing Super Series tournament, the quarterfinals at 140 pounds. I'll go to you, Gail. First fight I want to talk about in terms of that New Orleans card on DAZN, Regis Prograis and Terry Flanagan. I mean, Flanagan's last fight, he lost to Hooker. Prograis is really on the come up. If Prograis is the fighter we think he is, he should beat Flanagan and beat Flanagan by a pretty wide margin. Am I wrong to think that?
you aren't wrong at all. That's what we all expect. That's what he should do. But, you know, I recall our conversation a few weeks ago saying virtually the same thing about another fighter named Zolani Tete. So, you know, the Super Series sometimes has a funny way of doing things. In this case, Prograis is fighting at home in New Orleans. He's being developed there as a local attraction that fills the seats, just like Crawford has successfully done the same in Omaha, Nebraska. He's engaging. He has a good work ethic. He has an amazing attitude. This is a guy who, in his young life as a kid, lost everything to Hurricane Katrina, and a couple of years ago pretty much lost everything again to Hurricane Harvey in Houston, and has the sunniest, most positive attitude you can imagine. He talks very matter-of-factly of having nothing but, you know, 2 pair of jeans, a pair of shoes, and, you know, a handful of shirts to his name, you know, and that's it. And he acts no differently whether he has things and comfort or doesn't. And that serves him very well in this game. He loves to talk. He loves the fans. He loves the media. You know, he's built for a show, and he has the skills to back it up. He has the punching power. He has the ring generalship. However, we expected a blowout for Tete. We're expecting a blowout for Prograis. You know, hopefully he can deliver it. But this series does have a strange way of, you know, changing the script. So we'll see. But Flanagan lost to Hooker, who's not exactly a powerhouse in himself. I mean, he really has, in my opinion, very little to offer up against Prograis.
I'm sure Daniel would corroborate that.
Oh,
I hope
yes. Oh, yes. Terry Flanagan. Oh, my favorite UK fighter, Terry Flanagan.
I mean, I just don't see from a physical standpoint how Flanagan can put anything on Prograis.
He can't.
And I don't think he's an elite enough boxer. I don't think he's a elite enough boxer to sit there and outbox Prograis either.
You know,
So what advantage does he really have?
Flanagan is filler material in this tournament. Now,
What was that, Gus?
I think he's not a bad boxer, but he had no power at 135. It looks like he's got absolutely no power at 140.
That's the difficult part. Like I understand some of the things that happened with Flanagan that produced some of the craptastic fights that I've gotten used to him doing watching, but you can't really, unfortunately, give him much of an edge when he is a smaller man. Prograis is naturally the bigger man in this. And unlike Hooker, Prograis packs a punch. So that's gonna be the main difference maker. I could see Prograis stopping him, but I wouldn't be like a spectacular knockout. I could just see the same way that Tenant Farmer finished off Tennyson. Who knows? Who knows? Flanagan might even do the Tennyson yoga pose that he did when he ended the fight.
Let's move on.
I'm going for Flanagan on points.
Stop it, Gus. Stop it, Gus.
Only if you beat the spread or something. My God.
Why not, Mike? You know who's giving him a chance, man. I'm gonna put a couple of quid on him.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
No, Gus. No, save your money, man. Save your money. Brexit ain't looking too good right now, so save your money.
He's not Tyson Fury, Gus. I'm just saying.
Gus can get by with the Bitcoin. So
I think Gus is up past his bedtime is the problem.
Actually, let me just ask this before, Gus, because I need to know, are there actually Bitcoin ATMs in the UK?
No.
Okay, so it's all in Eastern Europe that I've seen.
Indeed. Let's get to this. Let's get to this last fight, and anybody who wants to comment, please do. This last fight with Baranchyk and Yigit, another quarterfinal of the World Boxing Super Series junior welterweight tournament that's taking place on the undercard of Prograis and Flanagan happening in New Orleans. If anybody wants to discuss this fight, please do.
I love Baranchyk, but I haven't really seen Yigit, so can't comment too much on it. Baranchyk for me is one of my just from the sense of the way he fights in the ring, Mike. He might not be the most technically skilled or have the best sort of ring IQ, but he's athletic. He brings it, and for me, it's always been a dream showdown for the last 2 years. I want to see Kirill Relik, and I want to see him against Baranchyk. I've had that match for 2 years.
Oh man, Gus, you got my ears perked up now, Gus.
I spoke about it with Low Place about 1.5 years ago. I said that for me is a dream sort of car crash matchup I want to see.
You know what? That's the perfect way to acknowledge it when it comes to Baranchyk. Yes, he's not the most technically sound, like he's still learning on the job. But you know what? You cannot put right now the term boring fight and Baranchyk at the same time. You will get your money's worth watching Ivan Baranchyk. Like he showed it in that last year, I think. The Showbox Fight of the Year almost.
What a fight, mate.
That's right.
I'm like, there's barely ever been a fight where I'm in my living room standing made me do it, because that fight was beautiful.
Ooh, interesting question here in the YouTube chat. Shout out to D22. Earlier we talked Tevin Farmer. The question he posed is Farmer versus Jose Pedraza if they were to fight again, part 2. What do you think, guys?
Based on Farmer's recent performance, Farmer.
Yeah, I think Pedraza's with a new trainer. I think so. The old rule, I think, is you got to get 2 or 3 fights in before you really master the style. And right now, like I said, Farmer has that skill set where Pedraza can fight awkwardly. He can fight in sort of like I would probably say Pablo Cesar Cano type, where he's a sort of weird herky-jerky technical in a way. But that works only when it comes to with guys that come straight forward for a while. Farmer has shown he's willing to come forward, but he's going to come forward with angles. He's going to come forward now with a variance of attack and knowing his foot position well where he'll get away from counters. So I would go Farmer.
Well, and there's such a thing as momentum too, and Farmer has the momentum. So in an otherwise even fight, you go with the guy that's on a roll. Farmer's on a roll.
Pedraza, of course, just beat Bray Beltran for the fight. He's going to fight Lomachenko in December. Your thoughts, Gus, to the question posed in the chat. Pedraza, if he was to fight a rematch with Farmer, what you think?
I agree 100% with Gal and Daniel, and also momentum and confidence. He's got unbelievable amount of not only self-confidence, but people can really see his talent. He's able to showcase and express it now. He's the superior fighter, Mike, not only on the front foot, but I think, sideways and sort of laterally as well. I see some adjustments he's making now further to the first Pedraza fight. He's got more. He's got educated hands now, and he never really had that before. He's able to, hook off jabs, which is something he really didn't do much before, specifically because he never really had that sort of upbringing in boxing. So he's on that. Yeah, he's on the upwards curve, I think. I could see Farmer, out comfortably boxing him 8 rounds to 4, Mike.
Yeah, for those who do not know, Pedraza and Tevin Farmer fought early in Tevin Farmer's career, 2012. Pedraza stopped him, I want to say, in round 8. Yeah, I stopped him in the 8th round. But yeah, Farmer has improved so significantly in that 6-year span. I will have to agree with everybody here at this point. Because Farmer can do so much in the ring, because his skill set has gone to really close to elite level, I think he would just provide too much for Pedraza. He would make Pedraza come forward, and Pedraza fights mainly one way when he comes forward. Based on what I saw against Beltran from Pedraza, that guy is not beating the Farmer we've seen from him over the past year or so. Going back to this Baranchyk Yigit fight, Daniel, Gail, your thoughts on it before we close things down?
Baranchyk, you know, his adjustments have been going from what was a very good amateur career to the professional ranks. You know, sometimes guys absorb the amateur style and have a tough time shaking it off. But I think the progression we've seen with Baranchyk is that he's done that. And when he got into that fight with Ramos last year, which is the fight of the year candidate we were talking about, which was just crazy good. You know, that was a turning point for him, and an important one. A very rough fight. You know, he got the better of it. He survived. That goes a long way, you know, and our theme here at the end of the show seems to be momentum. And that, to me, provided the momentum that he's taken all the way into 2018. A lot of people believe, despite all of the talk about Yigit, that he's going to be exposed eventually. This might be the fight where it happens.
Last word, Daniel?
Like I said, when it comes to Ivan Baranchyk, the word boring does not apply at the moment. And I agree with that sense. Like just the fight with Ramos, that not only did he go through a tough test where he had to go the full rounds when he was mowing people down like in the first or second round, he also was knocked down after he knocked down Ramos. So there were a lot of lessons that he learned from that fight, and I think he's going to start applying them more and more, because luckily he's at that age where you start soaking in a lot more knowledge, and it benefits you because you have so much more left in front of your career.
I think we're going to start shutting things down on that note. I want to thank D22 listening on the live on YouTube Live, as well as the question in the live YouTube chat. Going to go around the panel here. Begin the show starting with ladies first. Going to end the show starting with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk Dancing with the Stars, Game of Thrones, small business advice. Let the folks know where they can find you.
You can find me on Communities Digital News. That's where my regular column runs. It's COM, C-O-M-M, Digi, D-I-G-I, News, comdiginews.com. Don't forget, Hardy Vincent 2, HBO Boxing Saturday.
Indeed, indeed. Gus from Corruption in Boxing. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk music, let the people know where they can hit you. Let them know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure. Corruption in Boxing. Back on YouTube, I've been a bit of a recluse recently, but I did a recent video about that Billy Joe Saunders situation, which somebody put out on Twitter, and you know, I don't operate Twitter, and it went crazy there. I've just been getting tremendous amount of comments on that. Yeah, you can catch me also writing about music on Bandcamp, Beatport, Juno Records as well.
Last but certainly not least, Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk NBA specifically when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yes, folks. You can find me on Twitter at Raucus99. You can also find me in my show, the folks of 4 Boxing News. I think we're doing it on Thursday. We're previewing this fights and definitely talking about all that's happening, including, I think we might have missed one, but I am not surprised we're going to miss it. The fest that is Pulev versus Fury, I think, is still happening.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that fight. My bad. So yeah, Fury is talking about possibly fighting Anthony Joshua in April. Should he win? Just no. 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 For those who want to talk boxing or music or fitness with me, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, want to find out all information regarding pound for pound boxing report, the blog page is the place to go to, P4P Boxing Report. .wordpress.com. Check the right of the page. You'll find links to where to find us all over social media. Also, where to find us on any platform that carries podcasts, minus Spotify. If you like what you've heard this evening, click that like button on YouTube. Click that subscribe button on YouTube. Also, subscribe to us on iTunes and SoundCloud. Leave a review on iTunes. We'd love to hear your commentary. Positive or negative. May well read it on the show. Again, as I said to begin the show, if you're into fitness, check the blog page to check out my fitness coach page on Beachbody. If you need some tips or want some tips and advice in terms of health and fitness, or if you're interested in any kind of program that'll help you get into better shape, especially with the holidays coming, just hit me up. The fitness page on the bottom right-hand portion of Pound for Pound Box Report blog page. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Jacobs Derevanchenko of Machado Evans. Heather Hardy, she's fighting Shelly. Vencent, grudge match there. Prograis, Terry Flanagan, Baranchyk, and Yigit. And we would do a preview of Miguel Burchell fighting Ricky Roman. Burchell defending his WBC title at junior lightweights. That's going to be on ESPN Plus. Also, a junior welterweight, who I'm pretty intrigued by. Josh Taylor, he's fighting Ryan Martin on the World Boxing Super Series junior welterweight tournament. That fight is happening in Glasgow, Scotland. You want to say something, Gus?
No, I said, yeah, great fight. I know Gail likes Ryan Martin. I've been following his career, so yeah, that's a great matchup.
Also on that Glasgow DAZN card, on the undercard of that is the last quarterfinals of the World Boxing Super Series Bantamweight tournament as Ryan Burnett. He's going to fight Nonito Donaire. That's fight is going to be on the DAZN card in Glasgow, Scotland. Also, this is all happening on the weekend of the 3rd, I believe. Facebook Watch. Sullivan Barrera fighting Shawnee Monahan. I know Gail took part of a conference call regarding that fight today, as a matter of fact. So we're going to talk about all of those fights. For Gail from Communities Digital News, Gus from Corruption and Boxing, Daniel from The Inscriber. I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 227 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. Everybody have a good evening. Good night.
Adios.
Night, folks.